Without further ado, I'll get into our project, which we call All Things Trinity, All Things Conservation. So just to bring up some key points of the Trinity. As most of you probably know, it connects Dallas-Fort Worth to Houston. And you can see Houston is not actually inside the river basin, but they do derive a lot of their drinking water from the Trinity. And that's why 40% of the Texas population gets their water from the Trinity. So it's arguably the most important river basin in the state. There's 8 million people that live in the basin. The river is 512 miles long as it starts up in North Texas near the Oklahoma border. It has almost 2,000 miles of tributaries that feed it, and the basin covers a landmass of 18,000 square miles. And this is just a shot of some of the sub-watersheds that make up the Trinity River Basin, and I won't go into that because I have someone that's much more knowledgeable than me that'll come talk about what a watershed is, and but that's just to kind of picture all the different watersheds that make up the entire river basin and ultimately end up in the river. So obviously the biggest challenge facing our river basin is expected population growth in the state. And it's statewide, it's a major issue, but in particular the Trinity River Basin, as a lot of that extra growth, we're expected to double by 2060. We'll be at 45 million people in the state. And most of that will be in our urban centers, Dallas, Fort Worth, Houston, Austin, San Antonio. So with that, we get a lot more demand on the river with that rapidly increasing population. But not only greater demand, but we also see resulting poor water quality as more development, more urbanization, more wastewater contributes pollutants to the river. And not only the urbanization, but we've seen significant habitat loss throughout the Middle Basin, in particular native grasslands that support our upland game birds, and with that we've seen declining populations of those game birds, which has led to reduced recreational opportunities and economic opportunities for landowners. So, well, you might be asking, how bad is the river? And so, every 2 years, and like I said, there'll be another presentation later that'll talk a little bit more about this and go in depth, so I'll just kind of give you kind of a broad overview. But every 2 years, the state examines water quality, tests the water quality in a lot of our streams around the state. And that's because of the Clean Water Act grant, or Clean Water Act back in the 70s. And the streams that they deem too polluted to meet their designated use get put on the 303D list. So, in the Trinity River, 37 segments are impaired, which means that they're polluted beyond their standards for their designated use. And I don't know exactly how many segments were monitored or tested in the entire basin, but that's still a pretty high number. And then we have 67 segments that are of concern, which means that their pollutant levels are rising or they're close to not meeting their standard. 4 segments were delisted from the list in the past 2 years, but we added 7 more. And 27 of those 37 are impaired due to high levels of bacteria. So since about 2000, landowners in the Middle Trinity have recognized this problem as well as habitat loss, and they've come together to provide solutions to work towards a common goal. And this gained the attention of the state, and in 2006 the governor announced the Trinity River Basin Restoration Initiative, which seeks to improve the water quality and quantity in the river through habitat restoration, and also to build the capacity of Trinity Waters as a nonprofit landowner organization that can be the voice for conservation in the basin, as a one-stop shop for landowners, to work for the landowners. And then we want to foster this culture that is conservation-minded for our wildlife, agriculture, and water management issues. So this is a shot of what we consider the Middle Basin, this area between Dallas and Lake Livingston. And this has really been our primary focus as of the present time. So the purpose of the Cooperative Conservation Project is pretty much like it sounds, working together for conservation. We want to get landowners at the forefront to take that charge, and through Trinity Waters we're doing that. We want to see neighbor working with neighbor. As one neighbor implements good conservation practices on their land, we want them to show that to their neighbors and teach them how they can do it on their own land. And this can prevent future unnecessary regulation, as if we improve the conditions in the river and in the basin, then we won't have to spend taxpayer dollars to come up with these plans that are just unnecessary. And this will magnify our conservation dollars, as we're not relying exclusively on agencies such as Texas Parks and Wildlife, NRCS, and Extension, and others. And then we can develop resource management leadership in the basin as these landowners begin taking the charge. So the mission of Trinity Waters is to improve the quality of life, economic sustainability, ecological integrity of areas associated with the Trinity River Basin through a coalition of local communities, non-governmental organizations, and stewards of private and public lands. So when you notice the first two, quality of life and economic sustainability, that relates to the landowners. That's because Trinity Waters, they are landowners, and they know that if your quality of life and economic sustainability aren't good, then chances are the ecological integrity will suffer as well. So we want to make sure that our landowners have a good quality of life and that they're doing practices that benefit the sustainability of their land operation. So some goals associated with our project are to establish these cooperative conservation partnerships among landowners, NGOs, and agencies. And as Ken was saying earlier, we've done a great job of connecting with Parks and Wildlife, NRCS, and many others. And then to foster this cooperative natural resources culture where we just have people that are conservation minded and want to do right by the land, and that will also benefit the water resources of the basin. So these next goals really build off the last two. As we have that conservation mindset, we can restore and conserve our wildlife habitat, and this will increase wildlife populations throughout the basin and provide greater recreational opportunities and economic opportunities for landowners, as hunting and fishing and nature tourism opportunities arise from that. And then as we get that native wildlife habitat back, those plants that have been here, that know the climate, know the soils, we can improve the water resources in the basin as we allow for those land-water interactions. We allow for the infiltration into the ground and reduce erosion off the land, which will reduce pollutants going into the river as well. And we also want to educate landowners about watershed ecosystem services. And that's basically benefits that people obtain from ecosystems. So that some examples of that are water purification, clean air, wildlife, timber, agriculture, things like that a lot of times we take for granted. And then to inform landowners of the economic opportunities associated with ecosystem services, Obviously, hunting and fishing and ecotourism are good examples, but there's other things such as wetland mitigation banks, which I won't delve into right now, but you can just keep that in your mind, investigate it if you're interested. So some tasks that we have to accomplish to accomplish these goals are to enhance our communication and data accessibility, and then deliver this information to the public and work with landowners to restore that habitat. So the first great tool that we've developed is the Trinity Waters website at trinitywaters.org. And in there we have a landowner library of over 400 natural resource publications and links related to watershed management, water conservation, livestock production, wildlife management, and then educational resources for students and economic publications or links for landowners. We also highlight different projects and news and events that are going on within the basin. And then we're conducting educational programs like these, where we talk about watershed management, water quality, habitat restoration, livestock, wildlife, and feral hogs to give landowners the information they need in order to make the best decisions for their land. So Trinity Waters also works with the Texas Wildlife Association on their Learning Across New Dimensions in Science program, or LANDS. And there's one dedicated to the Trinity. At the present time, there's, I believe, 4 schools enrolled in this program. And basically, they have curriculum that they teach in the classroom, but then they get kids outside. They get them on the land doing water quality testing, habitat assessment, and things like that, so that they make that connection with the real world and not just have their face in a book. And from what I've been told, students that are involved in this program, their math and science scores are much higher than their peers that aren't in the program. So it's great for our math and science needs. We're also developing educational materials such as publications, which if you haven't had a chance, over here along the wall, we have several great publications that we've produced. The latest one we produced is the Native Grassland Restoration publication, which basically outlines the steps that a landowner would need to take in order to restore from introduced grass pastures or a mix of introduced grass and natives back to full natives. We also have a great social media component to our project as you know, as these social media sites are continuing to take off. I read something the other day that Facebook got its 1 billionth user on there just recently. And so really embracing this new movement towards social media, and we use Facebook and Twitter for daily interaction with our fans or followers, however you want to say it. But you may say, well, I don't have an account for those. I don't want to do that. I understand. Our Scoop It is basically an online newspaper that we post different stories that about wildlife or livestock, agriculture, drought, or water management in general, and we post them on there. And you can scroll through and see what you like and click on the article and read it. And it's real simple. And you can find all the links to these websites at the top right on our trinitywaters.org website. We also utilize the Wildlife Fisheries Extension YouTube channel, as well as their Wild Wanderings blog, and we use Flickr to upload photos from throughout the basin. And this is another great tool. The Trinity River Information Management System, or TRIMS, was developed by the Institute of Renewable Natural Resources at A&M. And it's basically an online mapping tool. And if you're familiar with Google Earth or GIS, it's kind of an in-between Google Earth and GIS as far as its features and functions. You can look at large scale, or you can zoom to a single pasture or whatever. It has some basic features such as measurement. You can measure acreage or area. You can measure lengths. But there's also soils, vegetation, elevation, and stream data available on there. So you can really look at how the water and the soil and the plants interact with each other on your property. And then they also, R&R also went in and developed a restoration potential for bottomland hardwoods in the Trinity River Basin. You can see on this map, these areas in blue are existing bottomland forest. And they went and looked at the soils, elevation, and the stream data, and they determined that these areas in yellow could potentially be restored to bottomland hardwood forest. Not saying that they ultimately could be, but they have the potential to be. And you can see the yellow basically doubles the blue areas.
Does this go further back up, or is it just in those counties that you have this information?
It's
Kaufman County.
It's in Kaufman County. I think it covers 38 counties. If there's any part of the Trinity River Basin in the county, all that information is in there. But you can still use trims in other counties, but you can't access the soils, vegetation, or elevation data. But you can still use the measurement tools in there. So just to kind of give you an idea of some projects that have been going on in the basin since Trinity Waters began, the Johnston family properties, I guess just a little west of here, they did a 50% cost share with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, where they restored 200 acres of wetlands and bottomland hardwoods, and they reseeded 400 acres of cropland to native prairie to enhance the wildlife populations on their property to get that income diversification. Another great example is the Western Navarro Bobwhite Recovery Initiative in Western Navarro County. This is led by Jay Whiteside of Texas Parks and Wildlife. Back a few years ago, they found a remnant population of quail in the western part of that county. And so they decided, Jay and many landowners joined together and said, we want to restore our lands to benefit quail. And so at the present time, I want to say there's about 30,000 acres worth of property and landowners that are committed to restoring their land for quail. But as you can imagine, restoring all that land back to native prairie would have significant water benefits as well. And as of this last year, they had 1,500 acres restored. But obviously the drought kind of hammered everything. So another example, still in Navarro County, along the Mill Creek tributary that feeds ultimately into Chambers Creek, is the Waters a Crop project. And as Ken said earlier, this program was developed by St. County Foundation in Wisconsin, but Trinity Waters is the local implementing partner here in the Trinity. And basically, they want to empower people to enhance the water resources on their land. And so they provide educational and financial incentives for landowners to implement conservation practices on their land that will benefit the water resources coming off their land and ultimately downstream. As the big emphasis at this point is riparian buffers right there along the streams on either side. Basically, that's to reduce erosion and pollutants that are going off into Mill Creek so that we get less sedimentation in the Richland Chambers Reservoir, which is very important because that water goes back up to 1.6 million people in Fort Worth for their drinking water. So that urban-rural connection is very evident in that watershed. And to kind of give you an better idea of the project, we have just a short video.
As a water supply agency for the 1.7, 1.8 million people that we serve, we've got a lot of challenges. One of the major ones for this region is drought. There's a host of different things that happen in that watershed that potentially impact the amount of water that we have stored in reservoirs and the quality of that water. It's critical for us that we find partners that are already established in that watershed that have potential to plug into the private landowners like Natural Resources Conservation Service or Soil Water Conservation Service or Trinity Waters or the Sand County Foundation.
Waters a Crop was developed by Sand County Foundation, and it's really a four-step process. First, we assess the land to see what conservation practices are needed. We train the landowners. We provide financial incentives, and we monitor the results of the conservation to show the value of our work. When landowners understand water as a crop, they'll cherish it and nurture it like they do other crops on their land. The Trinity Basin is a good place for the first water as a crop model project because the population here, including Dallas, Fort Worth, and Houston, are dependent upon the river system for their water supply and for their drinking water. The Water as a Crop program works with local partners. We work with local conservation groups like Trinity Waters, local leading landowners like Gary Price on 77 Ranch, and local investors such as Miller Coors and other local foundations in Texas.
Well, really, when you break ranching down, I mean, it's about grass and water. Water is a crop, and we're actually trying to see how water can have an added value to ranch diversification. Everybody's water comes across somebody's land somewhere. The practices that we do here obviously affect our urban friends and neighbors, their drinking water. And we know that by doing these conservation practices, whether it's growing tall native grasses and teaching folks about rotational grazing, that we can actually save them on the cleanup of that water and be a benefit to them downstream.
We've got to remember that the primary consumers of water are in the urban areas. Protecting the Trinity River Basin is so important because the watershed serves over 8 million people. It constitutes over 40% of the population of the state of Texas.
We pool financial resources from around the country to distribute at the local level. We make participation in the program simple for landowners, so it's zero cost to them. Miller Coors is the corporate sponsor for the Trinity project. They've also provided $150,000 of direct support for the project here in the Trinity Basin.
We here at Miller Coors, we believe with great beer comes great responsibility. Why I care about water conservation? It's because that's the basis for everything. If you have a practice of saving 1 gallon today, tomorrow it's 2 gallons. And because it's not an infinite source, that's one of the reasons why it's so important to bring water to the table of awareness of everybody.
Through this program, we were able to show the benefits of good conservation practices.
So, as a direct result of the work that was being done in the Mill Creek watershed through the Waters of Crop project, that gained the attention of NRCS and some others, and they were able to obtain funds for the Chambers Creek Water Quality Initiative. And as I said before, Mill Creek ultimately runs into Chambers Creek, which is the bigger tributary that feeds the Richland Chambers Reservoir. And this was announced back in May of this year. And so they've made available $5.4 million in financial assistance for landowners implementing conservation practices on their land that will benefit water quality and soil health. The main ones: cover crops, riparian buffers, and other. I saw their list and it was really long. Just conservation practices that will not only benefit water going downstream and those downstream users, but will enhance their agricultural productivity as they regain the soil health to boost their plant productivity. And this is a shot of the Chambers Creek watershed where that big initiative is going on. And then here's the Mill Creek watershed where the Waters Crop Project is focused at the present time. And ultimately, there's the reservoir. So you might be asking, what can I do? Well, you can assess your land. You can set conservation goals for your land, whether that's increase wildlife or manage for water, reduce erosion off your land. You can also work with your local Parks and Wildlife or NRCS biologist or your county extension agent to come up with these goals and ultimately to make a plan to implement those goals, because they have expertise and they can guide you through that process. You can also get involved with your neighbors. In this region, I know there's several wildlife management associations, which is a good thing for managing for wildlife. Kind of instead of landowners trying to do things by themselves, coming together to manage in a similar fashion to benefit wildlife. You can also get involved with Trinity Waters and other conservation groups such as the Texas Wildlife Association, because the restoration of the Trinity River Basin is a common link between urban and rural Texans. There's a lot of rural areas in the Trinity River Basin. There's also a good deal of urban areas. And the Richland Chambers example is significant, as all that water coming off those rural lands ultimately ends back up in the urban areas. So we're all connected. And this is a list of a lot of the partners thus far that Trinity Waters has worked with. And the funding for this program is through the Texas State Soil and Water Conservation Board through a Clean Water Act grant. And then here's our contact information for Ken and I.